Hello, everyone. This is Thomas Pepin, NHL Talk. I'm Thomas Pepin, and let's talk about the NHL. It's funny when people try to do like all, super serious and professional introductions. I don't get it. I mean, this is not a broadcast from like TSN or whatever. Even from them, I mean, I don't know why they don't just have more fun, but whatever. Anyways, so continuation of the NHL expansion series, and we're taking a look at failed franchises and potential new markets or potential new franchises, and seeing if the markets could support an expansion team. So, today is the last of the failed franchises, and we're looking at the Quebec Nordiques. And let's get into it. So I do have most things pulled up, so just a sec to share screen. So as normal, the beginning is gathering the data, and then we move on to calculations and discussion. And so I only have brief comments as I go through, really. But you do get to, well, I mean, the whole thing, every stream is done on the spot, no prep work except for the subject. And so you get to see me do the work, so you know exactly how I put together the data estimations, forecasts, whatever it is. And so there's a benefit to that, I guess. So we shall begin. Now, as normal, we start with the population. And how far is Montreal from Quebec? $264. And so what we were doing with the US teams was ballpark minimum distance of about 100 miles. So I just want to translate that to miles. 255. 255, yeah. So there's enough space. Now the problem is, so with American teams, something that I've noticed that I never really thought about or clued into about the States is, so Canada has these big population bases and like pretty much nothing in between, or nothing of significance. And what I noticed through the States is there's like a whole bunch of places with like 20,000 people, 20,000 people, 15,000 people, 15,000 people. And it's just in Canada, I mean, in certain regions you have stuff like that, but generally speaking, you have, well, right in between here, you've got a relatively big city, or, decent sized city. And I hate pronouncing it, so I'm just not going to, because I don't want to do it the English version, and I'm saying it the French version, and it sounds like I'm trying too hard. So we're just going to not say it. But anyways, so you got this big gap, and there's like nothing in between each of these places, and that's what it's like everywhere. And if you go into like all these northern areas that are not along the border, nothing. You've got like 500 people in each town. It's like there's nothing. So that's where Canada's a weird case. So Ontario, the province, is more or less a great place to have teams because there's so many. It's like an American state where there's a whole bunch of population bases all close to each other. Now, mind you, that's all in the southern part of Ontario. But you go into Quebec, there's big gaps. Um, you go eastward, the population bases aren't big enough. Westward, there's massive gaps. Uh, so it's just like it's really tough for any of these markets because it's the greater metropolitan area, and that's it. You might get some people that travel in, like so. For example, for Toronto, you'll have people travel in probably upwards to 120 kilometers to go see like the Toronto Maple Leafs. But beyond that, I mean, well, people from Quebec City, in theory, could travel to Montreal to see a game, but that's a heck of a trek. So it just doesn't like the Canadian markets are really tough. It's either you can support it in the city or you're not getting a team. Um, yeah, I just wanted to double check about the distance, like I said, between Montreal and Quebec City. To be honest, I wasn't sure if it was closer or not. So this kind of, well, just confirms it for me. So let's see. Now the funny thing is I did a bit of schooling in this town. It's just the worst town to say in French. Uh, there's too many and I don't like it. Um, so 137,000. You can't really add this into the Quebec City population, but I was just interested to see what what it was. It feels like this has grown since I've been there, but maybe not. Okay, so we want Greater Quebec area. I don't know what they call it. Quebec City area. Or maybe not. There's metropolitan too. We'll check both. 682,757. Okay, so I think this is probably. Ooh, wow, that's old. Man, we're not good at keeping up to date on our populations. God. Two 2006. I'm sorry, but Canada is just so brutal in some cases. Like, the most recent information we have is 2016. And in the States, everything was like 2021 at worst. It's like. Anyways, we won't get into that stuff. So this is going to be as close as we're going to get. Good enough is good enough sometimes. And so we'll start here. And so, I mean, already this is not a very good start. So 800,000 people. Like, gee. And I want to see. Huh. So it's about the same. And see, this one's up to 2021. Why is this one not? Because it's like... Okay, there we go. So 839311. That was different, right? Yeah. Okay, so that's also, I guess people aren't interested in updating Canadian stuff. So it's both, probably. So it's essentially the exact same as Winnipeg. So that's very interesting because now this means that we have almost an exact comparable in all respects. So first, because the population, like we just saw, but second, because it's Canadian, and Canadian markets are just, they're a different animal. They're more fan base dense than even the best of the U.S. places. So, or I would argue at least. But you can see it from all the registrations that we've seen already, anyway. So, I'm not wrong. I think very clearly. So, that's interesting to start. Now, the one thing is how to split up the hockey registration, because I believe it's done full province for Quebec. I know Ontario's split up and other parts are split up too. Yeah, it's full Quebec. And just look at this registration compared to the states. Like Quebec's like double, I think, the best U.S. state. I'd have to go back and double check, but Canadians like their hockey. It's clear as day. So I don't think it's split up any better. No. Okay. So now it's a question of how we distribute the registrations. So this is the total. Okay, so we've got Gatineau is near Montreal, isn't it? Or am I confused? No, I think I'm confusing places. Okay, that's near Ottawa. And how far is that from everything else? Far. Okay. Sherbrooke, I don't remember what that is. I think it's near Montreal. Yeah. We know where that is. Chicoutimi's north. Okay, so what I think we'll do then is wait, we'll figure that out. Saint Jerome. Saint Jean. Chateau Gay. I shouldn't be making fun of French so much because my whole background is French, but maybe I can because my whole background is French. I'm allowed to. That's what we'll say. So everything's far away from Quebec City, eh? Granby, I believe, is right near Montreal. Oops. Eloy? I haven't even heard of that place. Everything's near Montreal, wow. And it's all in that southern part near the US border. Mind you, there's water all between it, I believe all between it. So all those population bases are there's nothing close to Quebec City, I guess. A good thing we can do to check is see any of those that match up. Oh, never mind. Yeah, so that's Joliet. No. 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 Nothing. Okay, so then I guess what we'll do is my original instinct is we'll wait, no, we won't use that. We will use this. This equals 1 divided by this times that, and take this, put it here. Et voila, since we're doing French. So the registration is approximately that. So basically, what I did is I took the Quebec metropolitan area, divided it into the rest of the province's population to get the uh, portion of the registration that can be approximately allocated to, Quebec City, and so that is the result. Now the thing with Winnipeg, I cheated. I used the whole province, so I won't be able to compare that in that way, but it's gonna be fine because we don't need to have everything perfectly comparable. So that is that. Now we need attendance, and so I had pulled this up just before the stream, and I was very impressed. I didn't realize that it was this good. So 10742. Quebec Nordiques. And we need to see capacity. I love the logo. I don't know why. It's like so retro and very Quebec. Like, it reminds me of what's the so first their baseball team, which I gotta remember what the name of their baseball team was. Expos. So you can see the color kind of scheme, very similar, very retro feel. So like this logo down here, it's very Quebec. And then it was the Montreal Expo, I think is what it was called. The World Expo. What was it called? I could have sworn there was a logo that I remember seeing. That's not right. Anyways, I guess, I don't know. Maybe it's something else that I saw. Who knows? But, anyways, I like the logo. It's all I was getting at. Colisée de Québec. I think. Is it still in operation? So wait, so this is the correct one, it looks like. For hockey is gone. Okay, there we go. So that might be misleading. So 79.80. That was the minimum, so they were at capacity. It doesn't make sense to use that as the minimum then. So then 81 is the first one. Yeah, and it went right to capacity. So So then it's the 13,666. That's not a good number. 13,666. So that's the minimum, and that makes more sense now. And maximum is 151. I think that's it. Yeah. 15120. Capacity goes here. Actually, we'll just use this one here because apparently this is correct. Oh, whoops, did I do the wrong one there? I did. Okay, so that's good. Now we can get rid of that. We want... So 91, 92 is this divided by 880. Ah, shoot. No. Almost. And the best year was 81, 80, whoops, 81, 82. Divided by 840. All right. And they weren't around late enough to get evaluations, so we can't do that. We don't need this. Don't need that. Question mark, and then we're on to calculations and discussion. Cool. So, where do we start? So, the registration already, I mean, it looks super low. But, well, actually, this is a good way to demonstrate. So just go over to registration as a percentage of the population, and it's one of the highest. So I stand corrected. So Minnesota is good, but again, we're using the whole state for Minnesota. Like all of Minnesota's registration, but we were using the full state as the population too, I believe. So I think it is essentially apples to apples. So in this case, yeah, they're very comparable. Quebec's city exclusively compared to the state of Minnesota. So then I stand corrected. There's one state at least, because I don't think Michigan's quite as good. Where the population is, or registration as a percentage of the population is similar to a Canadian place. So in this case, it's comparable, which makes sense because if you take a look at the attendance history, it was like really consistent. There was a little dip towards the end, but very consistent. So minimum attendance as a percentage of capacity was 88.54. What is similar? So it's similar to LA, which are very different markets, but if you can fill up the arena in LA with, or sorry, I should say, if you can drop that low in a city with such a huge population, and at the worst case scenario, in a population so small, it's about the same, that really indicates that Quebec is quite strong. What else is comparable? San Jose's done very well. I'm surprised about San Jose. Who else? At its worst, in the past, which is a long time ago, well, relatively long time ago, it was better than Winnipeg's worst since they came back, which really tells you that Quebec might be a better market than Winnipeg, which is very odd. Nah, it's not that odd, I guess. It seems about right. Because, okay, since my family background's French Canadian, I know that they're way more hockey mad, or it seems like they're more hockey mad in Quebec than in Winnipeg Manitoba. I can also say that somewhat fairly because I have family in Manitoba and I've been there enough times, and I'm a Jets fan technically, so I have enough of a background about Manitoba that I believe Quebec is more into hockey than Manitoba. Now, an easy way to figure that out is to do the registration as a percentage of the population. So just so I'm not talking and making things up, we will get actual numbers. Okay. So, oops. Quebec is this divided by now. Also, things might be skewed because Quebec's population is larger, so just something to keep in mind. If my point's not proven, it still might technically be correct, but we'll check anyways. So this divided by this times 100. So it is better, but the population is like 7 times larger in Quebec. So again, it's misleading. So it doesn't demonstrate my point. So maybe I'm wrong, but I would argue that Quebecers are more into hockey than Manitobans. But that proves me wrong, and maybe I am wrong. It's hard to say. So anyways, the reason for that was what? Oh, because the attendance was on the low end was less. So as a percentage of their capacity, their best was 97.97%. Winnipeg was 102.67. 97 is similar to Columbus's best year. Anyone else? Colorado's best year. Anaheim's best year. So it's right up there. I mean, it's essentially at capacity on their best year. On their worst year was 94.18% of the average for the league. That's similar to San Jose. So San Jose is pretty strong. LA, similar. Better than Winnipeg. Better than Colorado. And then on the high end, it's 118.58% versus the league average. And that's one of the highest there. Yeah, it's higher than everybody else. So, I mean, compared to the league, which compares, the time in which the team existed, it was an extremely strong team for attendance in the years that it existed. And the fact that it was near capacity, even at the worst case scenario, is extremely promising. Mind you, the capacity was a lot smaller. So when you compare that to Winnipeg, the capacity was slightly more versus even the current Winnipeg, and they've done better. So they didn't do better on the high end, but again, remember this is in the past. But they definitely did on the low end, and on the high end they were very close anyways. So essentially, I mean, you could argue it's one of the strongest places that we've looked at so far. Maybe Minnesota being the only better one. So Colorado, on the low end it's better. Even so, the attendance in their time at the low end was nearly the same as the low end for the Avalanche, which, I mean, mind you, the Nordiques turned into the Avalanche, but it's completely different markets, so the attendance is going to be different. And it's basically the same. And it's, well, I mean, in theory, a lot smaller of a market, but just the fan base is that strong, it looks like. So I'd say it's better than the Avalanche. It's not as good as Minnesota Wild. Clearly better than Atlanta. LA is just so huge that they're difficult to compete with. But in the ability to fill the rink better than, or in the ability to get a certain minimum amount of fans, it's better than Anaheim. I guess that's a good way to look at the rest. So better than Anaheim, slightly worse than San Jose, better than everywhere else. I mean, it's kind of comparable to Columbus, and this is, again, we're looking at past numbers, so it's going to probably would do better than Columbus now, and Columbus is more or less at capacity all the time. So I think that's probably the closest comparable is Columbus, and Columbus in terms of attendance is very, very strong. better than Hartford, and well, clearly better than Kansas City. So I mean, of everywhere, Quebec should have a team. Why it doesn't, I mean, I kind of get it for a few reasons. So it's French, so the language, there's a language thing. I know there's Montreal, but Montreal is very anglicized. Is that the term? So there's a lot of English in Montreal. So, I mean, really, French isn't, it's not a factor. So maybe there's a bit of a hesitation because it's a different language and all the rest of the league is all essentially English. I know there's been comments about the local industry, the local market, and the ability to support the team. So in terms of like sponsorships, box rentals, advertising, all that kind of stuff. It's not going to be super strong in Quebec, and if anything, it's probably going to be weaker than a lot of places. But the fan base is just so strong that you're going to fill the rink all the time, no matter what. It seems like, at least. That's what I would argue based on these numbers. Because, so it's like we said before, where past failures, so like for example Minnesota and what was another one? Well, I guess to some degree Winnipeg, Cleveland is kind of a similar concept, Hartford. So all these teams that had consistent attendance, it was just very low in the past. Now you reattempt. So, for example, in Columbus, Winnipeg, Minnesota, all of those are very consistently near capacity. I mean, Winnipeg's a bit off, but Columbus and Minnesota are essentially at capacity all the time. So, if that's the case, if they all have the same characteristics historically, and the other two have similar characteristics now, then you would estimate that Quebec should have the same characteristics as Minnesota and Columbus. So then, as a result, Quebec should very clearly be a strong market, at least from an attendance perspective. It's the rest of this stuff that's a question. So ownership group, sponsorships, advertising, box purchases, rentals, however it works, and so on. So, but I would argue if you have a strong fan base, you're going to be fine, probably. It's how it feels to me. And all that aside, I would argue that Quebec is a better market than Winnipeg. And if that's the case, and Winnipeg's still in the league, I think they're kind of a borderline team, unfortunately. But if Winnipeg's in the league, Quebec should be in the league. It's clear as day to me. And I think that's a good way to close the discussion is Quebec City should have a team. And as far as I'm concerned, it's obvious that that's the case. One last thing I just want to double check because I don't know if they have any AHL and ECHL teams. I don't think they have either, actually. And I feel like it's because they want an NHL team. Because Laval is near Montreal. And Yeah, that's it. So they don't have a team. And yeah, there's no teams in Quebec, and so that I think that's got to be the reason is that they're just waiting for an NHL team, and I think they deserve one. It's as simple as that. Um, of all the places that should have a team, of all the ones that we've looked at, because now we've looked at all the failed franchises, um, Minnesota's a guaranteed better market, I would argue. And then otherwise, I'd say Columbus is a better market than Colorado, and even Quebec's a better market than Colorado in the end. Now, on the high end, Colorado has better potential because of population and things like that. But as a baseline minimum for attendance, it's Quebec. Definitely better than Colorado, better than Winnipeg, better than everything except for like where you're getting into crazy large populations like LA, Anaheim, San Jose, and so on. So essentially, of the smaller markets, it's like I said, it probably the same as Columbus is what I would say. So that means second best of the smaller markets. So it should have a team. It's obvious to me. Quebec should have a team. I know there's, like I've said, there's more to it because of you have to get income other ways too. But I'm sure they'd do fine. Yeah, mind you. I mean, so what we're moving into next, starting on Tuesday. Because just as a reminder, I'm taking a long weekend, so Saturday off and then Monday off of 2 days I usually would be streaming. So starting on Tuesday, we're going to be looking at potential new markets. And what I was just about to say is Quebec better than all of the potential new markets? That's a good question. I don't know. We won't know. We don't know right now, and we won't know until we take a look at them. But that's what we're doing next. So, as it stands, a team, yeah, I'd say that the one team that should exist and doesn't is the Quebec Nordiques, or whatever the name would be. Hartford, you could argue, is not quite strong enough, but I think they're still good enough too. So, essentially, to summarize all of the failed franchises and what should exist now, Atlanta, no good. California Seals. So, like I mentioned, I think that would be a very strong market in either Oakland, San Francisco, or is it Sacramento? I believe it's Sacramento. Let me just double check. Because again, I'm not American, so I just, Sacramento. So that California team, I think, should exist as well. I think they could definitely support a team. Cleveland, no, it's too small. Hartford is right on the edge. Kansas City, I'd say, is too small. And then Quebec is... so if California should have a team, Quebec should have a team. I think it's kind of the same kind of justification. Mind you, California probably can more safely support a team in the long run, but it's just Quebec should have a team. It's too strong of a market to not have a team, as far as I'm concerned. So, anyways, that kind of summarizes the failed franchises. Whether or not they could potentially succeed. And then like I said, starting Tuesday, we're going to take a look at potential new markets. And then after that, we can kind of figure out, well, if there's going to be an expansion, probably 2 teams, 1 per conference, and then we can maybe pick the top 2. So, yeah, so I think that's, that's what the plan is. So, otherwise, thanks for tuning in. If you like the stream, hit the like button, share with your friends, subscribe, turn on notifications. Otherwise, channel homepage has upcoming streams. Should be 3 p.m. Eastern daily, except for Sundays, minus tomorrow and Monday. So we're coming back on Tuesday. Any comments, leave them in the comments. Suggestions, same thing. And thanks for tuning in. We'll see you Tuesday.